I want to say also a brief but very sincere thank you to Maddie Dugan, who has helped make our Zoom programs possible. And thank you all again for joining us. We know that you sit on the screen a lot, but it's really special to us to continue to be able to connect with our community during the pandemic. So thank you all for showing up here this evening. And now I'm very excited to turn this over to Katherine, who is going to be presenting her research on her great grandfather's home. And I'm just gonna go ahead and start your PowerPoint for you, Katherine. There we go, and you are all set.
All right. Good evening to everyone. Okay, I'll do it right here. Historic properties are one of the most important features that make a community unique. And this was a quote by Lynn Redfield, a former owner of a Howard Van Doren Shaw house in Lake Forest. Tonight, I'd like to share a little bit about the life inside a beautiful lake home whose story spans from the early 1900s to present day, along with a glimpse of what is to come. It's about an historic Lake Forest home commissioned by my great-grandfather, Clayton Mark, designed and built by Howard Van Doren Shaw. After much research through archived letters, invoices, 8mm films, and personally interviewing his descendants, I have come to appreciate the life and times of this remarkable man. Let me introduce you to Clayton Mark. Clayton Mark was a self-made man who, with little more than a grade school education, became one of Chicago's most prominent steel industrialists and was considered one of the pioneer makers of steel pipe in the United States. He was born in 1858 in Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania. In 1872, Clayton's father, Cyrus, moved his family to Evanston, Illinois, where he opened a dry goods store. When it burned down, Clayton's parents moved to Iowa, with Clayton staying on to become a file clerk with the Chicago Malleable Iron Company. He moved up the corporate ladder, but was not content to work for someone else. So in 1888, at the age of 26, he opened a shop on LaSalle Street called Mark Manufacturing Company. This was a co-partnership with his father, where initially they manufactured well points, small castings used in the construction of wells. By 1900, his company now, Clayton Mark and Company, had expanded to include the manufacture of steel pipe. In 1916, he had several steel mills, one in Evanston on Dempster Street and the other in Ohio. He also built another one in Indiana Harbor to supply his own requirements for steel. Clayton Mark products were sold throughout the United States and many countries worldwide, including as far as Saudi Arabia. Beyond his commercial success, Clayton Mark was known for his compassion for his employees' welfare and dedication to education. He began construction along with Howard Van Doren Shaw on a worker community in 1917 to house the 8,000 workers at his mill in Indiana Harbor, giving them the opportunity to either rent or purchase their own homes. This was most uncommon at that time. Unfortunately, this was not fully realized due to the after effects of World War I. However, 97 original buildings that remain are regarded as an important cultural resource of architectural and historic significance. And Marktown was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1975. His interest and support in public education impacted the shaping of the Chicago school systems. He served on the Board of Education as its president from 1902 to 1905, where he facilitated numerous changes to ensure a safer and higher quality of education for children. He also served as president of the Civic Federation of Chicago from 1907 to 1929, an active reform group that addressed the city's social and political problems, collaborating with Jane Addams on a number of educational and social reforms. During his tenure as president of the Board of Trustees at Lake Forest College, he had the difficult task of financially separating Ferry Hall, Lake Forest Academy, and Lake Forest College. His plan, despite criticism, ultimately succeeded in creating 3 independent organizations. Despite all he undertook, Clayton was always a dedicated father to 9 children, writing letters daily, many of which I have today written to my grandmother. With that in mind, I want to take a closer look at the family life Clayton Mark cherished at 999 Lake Road. While his business expanded, so did his family. He married Anna Griffith in 1880, and together they had 9 children. Their first home, located at 747 Deer Path Road, but subsequently it burned down. Lydia, my grandmother, told the story that her only thought at the time of the fire was retrieving a ring her father had given her. In hindsight, she regretted that left behind was her entire jewelry box, all lost in the fire. Clayton immediately hired Howard Van Doren Shaw, a friend and well-known architect, to design his next home on Lake Road. He was familiar with Shaw's work as he had designed a home in Evanston for his parents. The new property was purchased from Ebenezer Buckingham, whose house had also burned down. With this traumatic incident in mind, Clayton specified that his new home had to be fireproof and large enough for his family of 11 and numerous servants. Shaw made sure to create 2 closets built specifically to store fire hoses, which connected to a large water container housed in the attic. Completed in 1914, it sat on 26 acres of property stretching from Lake Road to Hawthorne Lane. There were 10 outlying buildings to support and maintain the Mark lifestyle: a coach house, servants' quarters, head gardener's cottage, stables, and a garage. And there are 4 of the buildings that remain today, and these are all on Woodbine. Situated between the main house and these outlying buildings was a large flower and vegetable garden and a greenhouse. I learned that in 1916, Clayton and his gardener won the A.E. Kundred Prize for the best display of gladiolas at the Lake Forest County Fair. The family mausoleum was also designed by Shaw and stands today in the Lake Forest Cemetery at the north end of Lake Road. Clayton was concerned about possible water damage caused by leaks, so the building was constructed with large pieces of granite in order to limit seams. The capstone alone weighed 30 tons, which required a special railroad car to transport it. Railroad tracks had to be laid from the Lake Forest train station to the cemetery in order to bring the stones in for the mausoleum's construction. Fashioned after an Italian villa, the house stretched along a lakefront site with north and south wings. The lower stories surmounted by a broad hip roof punctuated by dormers. These wings wrapped around the sunken terrace garden, which was designed by the well-known landscape designer Rose Standish Nichols, author of the 1902 English Pleasure Gardens. Shaw's design did what few domestic architects were doing in the United States at that time, integrating the grand home's interior spaces with European-style formal gardens. A grandson recalled the terrace containing this flower garden and fish pool where he could swim and dive as a very young child. Another remembered one of the reflecting pools being used as a playpen when empty. In 1913, Herbert Crowley, the editor of the Architectural Recorder, wrote, "Mr. Shaw's houses possess to a very considerable extent the merit of being thoroughly livable. These houses are charming and inviting to a degree rarely exceeded in American domestic architecture." Mr. Shaw's work is further noteworthy for its sanity with respect to stylistic tradition. There were 12 bedrooms on the second floor, and this included the servants' wing with 5 bedrooms, each having a wash basin with the staff sharing 1 bathroom. My father told me that the 4 boys were in 1 dormer, while the girls were the lucky ones with their own bedroom and bathroom, each connecting to one another. And I am sure there were many nightly visits sharing stories. The first floor included a breakfast porch, and this is another angle of it, a dining room, billiard room, a lengthy hallway, which was 84 feet long, a library, a living room, and 2 porches. As was the style at that time in grand homes, there was a powder room for the ladies and a gentleman's room for the men. The house was built entirely of brick and stone with high ceilings, which kept it amazingly cool during the hot summers. However, a past owner told of one summer it was so hot, they had to move their mattresses up to the roof to catch only a slight breeze. The north wing of the house included a pantry, kitchen, servants' dining room, porch, and a bedroom, each for the butler and cook. These rooms were almost never entered by the family members, as everything was attended to and organized by the head housekeeper. In the summertime, the family found much to enjoy outdoors. There were 2 playhouses to the north of the house, which were in constant use by the 9 Mark children and friends, rope swings hanging from tree branches, and lawns large enough to offer a short golf course of sorts. I am sure presenting a good challenge. And there was play acting. It's amazing they had so many of these pictures. And that's Aunt Phyllis' cousins in the fountain. And swimming at the beach. Long horseback rides were enjoyed across the 26 acres on those horses reserved for casual jaunts. A recollection shared by one of Clayton's great-grandsons was there were frequent large parties attended by neighbors, friends from Chicago, and young gentlemen courting the ladies. When visiting from distances, these young gentlemen would bunk with the Mark brothers, and 3 of the 5 sisters married classmates of their brothers. The Mark grandchildren were close in age and entertained themselves under the watchful eyes of several nannies. Favorite memories for the grandchildren were creating hiding places, they called them secret caves, on the property, and playing hide and seek in the cavernous basement and the many trunks and houses in the attic. When the grandchildren summered at the Lake Road home, they most enjoyed swimming at the beach. Swimming and racing to the large rock was competitive and great sport. To be safe, each summer, 2 local boys were hired as lifeguards after a near disaster. Buggy rides with Clayton Mark were a favorite memory. Anna, his youngest daughter, accompanied by the head groomsman, would take the buggy to meet her father each evening at the train station, weather permitting. The next generation also enjoyed buggy rides through the countryside with their grandfather after dinner. After the Marks sold their family home, 3 more families would live here, spanning over 80 years to the present day. Clayton Mark passed away in 1936, leaving his home and estate to his 9 children, with 1 daughter and her son to remain to look after it. But the years took a toll, causing it to be in need of repair. In 1942, the Isham family moved into the home at a purchase price of $40,000. They felt the home was too big and repairs would be too costly, so they reduced its footprint by removing the entire south wing, which included the upstairs master bedroom and the living room downstairs. It was told that the neighbors were aghast when the south wing was torn down, resulting in the library being used as the billiard room, a change also disapproved of by the neighbors. The other changes were moving the north porch from the back of the house to the south side, where the living room had been. An elevator was added due to the Isham grandfather's emphysema, and the house was built so solidly that it took a jackhammer to break through from the first to the second floor. The Isham's grandmother referred to the Lake Road house as Moseley Hall, a cute reference to the English comedy at that time, Moseley Manor. This tremendously long hallway is where the Isham grandparents set up a train every year at Christmas for the little ones to ride. On Christmas Eve, it was remembered their grandfather, who loved clever mechanical toys and antique coin banks, placed them all on a pool table for the children to enjoy. There was a fountain at the end of the hall with a ball suspended over the water, which the grandfather could control. And as the water flowed, different images were created. Another fond memory was of each child receiving a large bale of twine to follow as it was unrolled throughout the house to find, in the end, a small gift. Grandfather Isham, dressed as Santa, would distribute gifts, followed by a very special and festive dinner in the large dining room. Younger children were allowed to sit at a smaller table set especially for them. The Mark Christmases were wonderful and elaborate as the 4 boys and 5 girls gathered around the Christmas tree in the billiard room where presents were gifted. On Christmas morning, the servants would stack each child's gifts into the shape of a Christmas tree. They then needed a ladder to reach the top in order to distribute the gifts. Another memory shared was of a toddler being so excited with every present that Clayton and Anna would have them rewrapped so they could be opened again and again. Tom Eklund and his family moved into the Lake Road house in 1987 and remained there until 2005 with his death. Tom loved the house and as a builder appreciated Shaw's artistry. Tom's feelings are best described in the words of Adrian Smith. As an architect, I appreciate the legacy of great design from our previous generation of esteemed architects, regardless of stylistic preferences. The greatest of these works are inspirational, beautiful, and some are worthy of wonder and awe. Sensitive preservation of the best examples is as important as creating the new future architecture. Tom won an award from the Historical Society for his preservation efforts and was featured in North Shore magazine for his work. He so loved the Lake Road house that he wanted to share the experience of living in it with his two married daughters and their families. He invited them to move in to the house with the rest of the family, which they did for several years. Football was played in the grand hall, crab apples eaten from the trees in the front yard, and breakfast time, affectionately referred to as the breakfast club, was shared each morning. The sound of music always floated through the house. One daughter described her years there as living in this house felt like being a part of history. Holidays were always exciting. Adults and children adored the house and its wonderful spirit. Grandchildren, which totaled 16, performed plays, had sing-alongs, and rode cozy coupes down the hall. There were endless games of hide and seek, and a secret passageway was discovered from the hallway to the gentleman's room. The Uplands, like the Ishams before them, made changes to the lake house to meet their needs. A stairway leading down the bluff to the beach was added along with a new beach house. Looking at old pictures, the original path down to the beach was only a dirt path, covered with leaves, using sticks to mark the steps for the stairs, presenting quite a challenge for those in long dresses. I imagine my great-grandparents did not go down often. And the Eklunds also added a garden house and a deck off the kitchen. The current family living in this historic home is Ron and Karina Garrett with their 4 children. Having lived nearby, they frequently walked by the Mark home and were intrigued. As fate would have it, while on a trip overseas, their realtor called them while they were on their plane that the house was going on the market and there were interested buyers. And I love this part of the story. They looked at each other for a moment and said, "Let's do it." Without ever having stepped into the house, the Garretts made the decision to buy. They have never looked back. Their Christmas tree in the dining room is truly a family creation, consisting of handmade ornaments from the grandmother to the current ones made by their children and those collected from their travels. The dining room is a center of gift giving and a large family dinner, all sitting at the dining room table, children included. Being a very athletic family, they have added an outdoor swimming pool and an indoor hockey rink located in the newly constructed sub-basement. The kitchen, originally consisting of multiple rooms, has been completely renovated, making it a manageable and comfortable living space. A garage has been added with the most modern conveniences, and they are in the process of adding a family room, which will connect the garage to the main house. Their future plans are to rebuild the south wing removed earlier and move the current and original porch located on the south of the house back to its original location. And there are a few stories that I would like to share from the past. Clarence, the oldest son, introduced Clayton to the new invention, the automobile. He saw them in Boston while attending Harvard. Clarence encouraged his father to buy one before, as he said, Clayton would be too old to drive one. Clayton did buy it. He was the 3rd person in Illinois to do so. And I guess the adage, everyone has one, didn't quite fit this scenario. My uncle said July 4th was a highlight when his cousins visited. They would set off firecrackers. He said they spent most of their allowances to purchase the largest and noisiest ones they could find. He said, we particularly liked torpedoes, which exploded when thrown against a hard surface. There could be no noise before 8 a.m., so we waited and set them off below the parents' rooms at exactly 8:01. On a more serious note, many banks were forced to close during the Depression, but the Main Street Bank in Evanston was the only bank that didn't, and that was because Clayton and a senator both committed to leaving their money in the bank throughout the crisis. And to make sure his employees didn't suffer during this time, Clayton sold his properties in Oregon to cover their wages. What makes 999 Lake Road so memorable and special for those who experienced it? For each family, this house became a home, one filled with love, laughter, and much activity. My great-grandfather and his children loved their home. There were fun times. Oh, sorry, I got too wrapped up in my talk. I'm going through the slides. There were fun times, weddings, a small scandal. However, it all worked out well. Swimming in the lake, tennis, and quiet times. Craig Bergman, a noted landscape designer from Lake Forest, said, "Anyone who owns an old house knows they are just the caretaker until the next one. These houses have a life of their own and need to be respected." Clayton would be pleased to know that what he built has been cared for by the next generations and will be far into the future. Before watching the video, I would like to acknowledge and thank all those people who helped make this presentation possible. And a special thank you to Pam and David Wad for underwriting the video and Maddie Dugan for underwriting the program. Ron and Karina Garrick graciously opened their home and shared their time with my family, the History Center, along with Jeff Zimmerman, our videographer, to produce this video. So sit back and enjoy the film.
Lovely, Katherine. All right, so we're going to go ahead and transfer this over to the video. As I said, internet speeds are going to affect this, but we're going to try for the best here.
My wife and I, we lived literally just a couple hundred meters from here over on Hawthorne, and we used to walk up and down Lake Road.
It just had been a house that we had always admired and loved as we walked by it.
And we understood historically that the house at one time had an east wing, a south wing, and a north wing. We always felt somewhat sad that it was missing those original parts of the house, and being able to basically give back the house its original stature is something that resonated to us.
It was a feeling of warmth, of like I could raise my family here. I felt another family presence here.
Well, as we've sort of discovered through the different families who have lived there, that it is a home. It's not just a house that everyone lives in for a period of time and then moves on. Everyone's very connected to the home, so there's this good feeling about it. It's a very unique thing, Lake Forest. People keep coming back. So our family has been here for over 100 years. Well, why is that? Like, why do people keep coming back to the same town?
What does that say about Lake Forest?
It's very welcoming and it's a home. Everyone feels good here.
Another aspect of all of this is how important the house was to each family. Mm-hmm. And they all have books. Mm-hmm. Your great grandmother, my grandmother, had a book put together for her sons. So all the cousins have this. But then the Ishams had called, and Mom lent them the book, so they copied it. And then they gave it to the Eklunds. So it keeps moving along. And the Eklunds have a book, but the Garricks have copied that book.
Right.
So this book keeps moving.
It does.
And now you have the book.
Right, and it's so pretty.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yes.
But this was, they wanted a record of the house. People just so enjoyed it.
And you're obviously committed to preserving the history. Where does that come from?
Well, I'm a member of a long family of mechanical engineers and tool and die individuals. My daughter's at Caltech and she's a mechanical engineer. My wife and I are both engineers. My grandfather invented the pull-top can. Mr. Mark invented basically the hand pump, which is a beautiful mechanical fluids type device. And that history, coupled with our interests, make restoring this house something very important to us.
We had all of the original house plans. I think that we try very hard to get original items and with the photographs do original work, structurally to the home. So anything that's original to this home is precious to us. And then this is usually everyone's favorite room in here. It's a beautiful room. It's just a lot of fun spending time here. We put our Christmas tree right there at the end. And everyone just really seems to be interested in the history of the home.
This painting is exactly the same painting that hung over the fireplace in the Marks' previous home on Deer Path Road that burned down in 1912, the same night as the Titanic. So I love this, and I love the history that this picture has basically sat here for over 100 years. When I was a kid, when we'd have large family gatherings, there would always be a kids' table, like a card table. I always hated those. So we actually got a set here where we could sit as many people as we could. And then we have a secondary table over here that's exactly the same as this table with additional leaves to put in so that if you have overflow, they're at the exact same table with the exact same chairs as everyone else.
And then the chandelier in the middle of the room is original, and they recreated all of these sconces.
We were able to go back to the original manufacturer from the Czech Republic and have another set of sconces made, as these sconces were no longer here.
And over here, the first floor with, you see here, we are in the billiards room. This originally was a living room because the original living room was torn off. So there was carpeting in here and a drop ceiling and all of these architectural elements you see were not there.
Yeah, it's so rustic.
I like it.
Yeah, no,
I really do.
We wanted to bring it back to the original billiard room. One of the things that I like the most is the arches in the ceiling. They were taken out, but we actually put the arches back in, and then the four heads that are in the corners were actually carved for the Columbian Exposition in 1893, and I was able to get them from an architectural salvage and bring them into this house. The fireplace is a fireplace that came out of a bar in Philadelphia, which was very similar to the original fireplace that was here, and then we had the doors made to exactly match the fireplace.
Limestone walls, we will just clean them up, honestly, and then the ceiling, we did a little bit of extra work with the paint to make sure that this was a lot more prominent. We wanted to see those details. Well, we also tried to decorate it a little bit like they did. They had stands here by the front door with plants.
So there's three things about this room that I really like. The first one is we have an original painting of Mr. Mark as a middle-aged man, and it's an original to his office that we were able to acquire from his family. The second one is this table here. It's called a sample table. And what it is when you were building a house in the late 1800s, this is a sample of all of the wood choices that you could make for your home And most people don't really understand the difference between walnut and mahogany and oak, quarter-stone oak. And this table has all of those different pieces. And you can say, I want the trim to be this, and I want the furniture to be this. And then the third piece is I have had the ability to travel all over the world. And whenever I come back from another country, I bring another piece from a different country. And I think I represent all of the countries I've been to with different elements in this room. So it's kind of a accumulation room, right, that we really enjoy.
I think it's perfect in here.
It is.
Because this was more of his room. I feel like that
Right.
he spent time in here
Yeah.
doing work.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's more like an office for him.
Moving forward, what's the next step?
Well, the plans moving forward are to restore the home to its original footprint.
To replace the east wing of the house, to replace the south wing of the house, such that it looks identical to the way it originally looked.
Caitlin, I just got this email from one of the Ishams. Let me read you this. I remember when I was about 5, you could see the remains of the fencing out in the water. And that's quite up the cliff.
Sure,
So the lake has really risen.
And then the bluff, that's very important. The lake and the level rising over the past few years has done so much damage to the properties along the lakefront. There's a retaining wall on the bluff that is in really fantastic shape, and it's doing its job for the part of the land that it's supposed to support. However, the rest of the land is definitely eroding, and we need a more substantial wall. So that will be a major project.
Long term, we're clearly putting this house such that it's attractive for our 4 children to come back, hopefully with their children as well, and this be a long-term Garrick's homestead, harking back on the 3 previous owners before us.
We love having people here. That's the reason why we have a big house, is because we love hosting, we love having people around us.
What do others say when they come into the house and they see how you're so committed to the history of the home and preserving things? And what's the collective reaction to that?
I think people are glad that somebody would take the effort to go pull all of that stuff together. And I think they see it as somewhat of a Renaissance behavior, as well as a historical preservation, okay? Downtown Chicago, and the history of the Mark family. The fact that, the Mark Mausoleum is right down the street, Marktown. The fact that they married into the Rockefeller family also just makes the story more and more interesting.
I was telling Caitlin about our wonderful conversation last night and how you felt about the house.
It's just a feeling that we just can't even put into words. There was just so much happiness, so much laughter. A year after my dad died, my mom was selling the house. She was not going to just sell it to anybody. The whole reason she sold it to the Garricks was because he said he wanted to bring it back to what it was originally.
You made it a home. I mean, it's just 4 walls, but you made it a home.
If Clayton Mark were around today, you brought him into the home, what do you think he would say?
I think the thing he would probably be most interested in is, because he's a mechanical individual, is that we took the boilers down in the basement and completely restored the boilers to what they looked like in 1911 instead of putting them in a landfill. I think he would find that to be remarkable. I think the fact that time has moved on and shutters are really no longer practical, but we reused all of the shutters, okay, in making the different cabinets downstairs. I think that he would look and say, it's a shame that the wings were taken off the house, but boy, you put them back, and you put them back in the way that the house originally was designed with Howard Van Doren Shaw, and thank you for doing that. And oh, by the way, that's the picture in the dining room that really mattered to me. And the picture of me in the library, why don't you take that down and put something more interesting?
It's really, like I said, very enjoyable for us to give back and gather people here. And I imagine that the Marks were the same, and that this was a place where people love to come. We own this house, but I feel like we're borrowing it too. I really do feel like we're sharing it. Maybe that's the better word for it. And it's a good feeling. It's not like that might sound sort of spooky or something, that we're sharing it with people that are passed on, but but they're family members like you.
Right, it's part of the story of the home.
Yes, and I hope that you and your mother and whoever comes in this house feels
Definitely.
like,
You're taking care of it.
Yes, and that you feel maybe a part of it too.
Yeah.
That's what we hope.
Jane had said that the house was a part of them, and it took her a year before she could drive by it. And then when her sister comes into town, they go to the house and sit on the street and reminisce. It's a part of them. It's their foundation. And I think the Ishams, there were 2 generations that lived in that house. So it's just to have that strong feeling. It was more than just 4 walls.
All right, so I am sure we have several questions. Carol, do you mind moderating some of these?
Not at all. All right, so we've already got a couple questions that came up during the show. One of which is, was Lake Road in its current location when Clayton Mark built the house? Who would like to field that question?
Well, it is. I mean, the house itself hasn't changed at all. I mean, some of the wings have been removed, but yes, that's the exact location.
No.
I don't know about Ebenezer, Buckingham, if that's where they had their house, but this is where Clayton, if I'm understanding.
No, the question is whether or not the road has been moved.
Oh, okay. That I don't know. I don't know that. Are there any cousins that know that answer? Maybe none.
No, I don't know if Lori is on. She probably knows the answer. And if we don't have the answer tonight, we will have the answer during the new maps exhibit that will be going up in May.
Yes, it is. It's in the same spot.
The road. Okay.
All right. And then we have one raised hand. Caitlin, you may unmute. Oh, no. No. Okay. She's shaking me off. All right. So let's see. Another question is, how much did it cost originally to build? I know we talked about the fact that when it was sold for $40,000, but do we have any idea what the original construction cost was?
No, I don't know that.
All right. And I think that other than having all of the various cousins introduce themselves, because everybody would like to know and meet all the descendants who are on tonight, any other questions about the presentation before we move into the profile of the family? Caitlin?
Are the Garricks on?
Yeah.
Are
Can
the
I
Garricks
ask,
on? No.
who asked about the price of how much it costs to build it? Because I have paperwork back and forth of like who, of the building of the property. So I probably could try and find it.
Well,
answer.
Okay.
The ballpark is good. I was just curious if it was like 50,000 or 5, it'd be an amazing number to look at today.
Yeah.
And Caitlin, I'm sure that there are invoices because
right.
Mark left a lot of invoices.
Right.
Unbelievable prices, which would be great fun to share about some of the orientals and some of the whistlers and
Right.
different etchings, you know, they were $25. They were 20, you know, the most expensive thing, Caitlin, on one of those was, what was it?
It was in the billiards room. There was a large cabinet that,
Right.
you know, held all of the pools and balls and things like that. And it was like $750. It was,
Yeah. And a place setting was 12, a place setting of China. It's just unbelievable what was so many years ago.
Yeah.
When was the property first subdivided? When the sort of off houses were sold off? Was that with the first sale that they divided that and then sold those as separate houses?
You know what? I don't know if there are any Ishams on. They might know that answer.
I have phone number for Kathy's car.
That's my mother.
Hi.
Trying to be helpful.
Yes. I want to call Kathy.
Julia? Oh.
Well, one data point that we have is if you look at the house to the south of this house, that house was built in 1925. So this property, when it was originally done in 1913, included the piece of property to the north and the piece of property to the south, in addition to the whole block across the street. But so we know the subdivision must have occurred before 1925 because that's the year the southern house was built.
Okay. Thank you for that.
When my grandparents, hello, I'm an Isham, and when my grandparents bought the house, it did not have any of the other houses there.
Oh.
And that is in there. So I do know that for sure.
Oh, that's interesting.
Me?
Yes. Whoever just said, is that me? Your echo is you. That is you. Sorry about that. All right. What was Clayton Mark like? What was his personality like?
Well, you know, no one really talked a lot about him. Obviously, he was a type A person when I think of how many things he was involved in, but he had a real concern, a real compassion for his employees. And, you know, when I said a couple of things, he didn't want them to suffer during the Depression. So he sold his property in Oregon. And the Marktown was unique. He wanted it to be like a town. And so they had designed, I mean, none of it came to fruition, but schools and a theater and a grocery store. And so he cared about them. So, and he also was very dedicated to education and very involved with setting, he felt strongly about in kindergarten, that children should be going to one before they entered school. So, you know, I think he was a good man. Now, whenever the relatives, my aunts and uncles would come to the house, nobody ever talked about him. So that was surprising to me, not as a child, but looking back on it, that they never did. This was all revelation, reading about Clayton Mark. I had no idea. So, but as I said, I think he was a very good man. I don't know if he was warm and fuzzy, but he certainly cared about others.
Well, warm and fuzzy would have been out of the norm at that point in American history anyways. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left. If everybody would like to introduce themselves who is a descendant and explain the descendant path, I think the rest of the audience would be very interested in that. And I don't know, Catherine, if you want to call out to people to introduce themselves. Or
all right, I don't, all right, I see there's Clayton Mark. Where can I do this? What view?
well, should everyone who's a descendant raise their hands, press the little button that says raise their hand?
All right, that would be good. We have two that have raised their hand.
Gallery. Okay.
And then Kathy, you
right.
can pick us.
Oh, there's Mary Beck Saville, and that's my first cousin, my father's brother's child, and John is here.
Well, I think
somewhere.
Kathy, if then they say it, because then they light up,
Oh.
and you can then everyone
Oh,
can
okay.
see who they are.
All right. Well, there's Mary Beck. What raises your hand? Oh, and there's
Say
John.
hi, Mary Beck.
You have
And
to
her brother John. And then let's see who else is here. Oh, I can't. All right, speak up. Unmute yourself, cousin, wherever you are.
Okay, so I'll speak up. So,
Meg.
Clayton and Kathy. Where's Clayton and Kathy? There they are.
Oh, there they are.
You have to unmute.
Susan
We'll try it again.
John's sister.
No, you're on. You're on.
We had trouble with the audio.
It's amazing how many Claytons there are, which is wonderful.
You got it? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. There's a lot of Clayton Marks. Yeah, my great grandfather was Clayton Mark. My grandfather was Clayton Mark Jr. My uncle is Clayton Mark III. My father is Stephen Mark. My cousin's Clayton Mark IV, and his son is Clayton Mark V. I'm Clayton Mark III.5 because we didn't think my cousin was going to be born. So I'm the second son on my side of the family. But this is a real joy to see this. I see some things in the house that are very nice, that bring back memories. And it was well put together. And I've been talking with Caitlin, and I think I have a good surprise for some of you later, but we have to do some technical things to get that developed.
We also have some of the furniture from the house still.
And we still have some of the furniture from the original house. So I'll pass it on to the next one.
All right, well, then I see the Wymans, Cherry.
Where's Cherry?
okay, here I am.
Oh, okay.
And there's Candy.
And my brother's right next to me in this, in the windows.
Oh,
Yeah, there
right
he is.
there.
With
Yeah,
Emily.
so there were four of us. Anyway, so my dad was Parker Wyman, and his mother was Phyllis, and Phyllis was one of Clayton Mark's daughters. And she ended up being the hostess for Clayton Mark. And so my dad grew up in that house with his mom and Clayton Mark. And my brother, yeah, and I also have some of the furniture from the house.
And we have that painting of Lydia.
Oh, this is my daughter. Yes. And yeah, we have a painting of Gaga Phyllis. We used to call her Gaga Phyllis.
Yeah.
And Phyllis must have had quite the personality by the fact that she was the one sitting in a fountain.
Yeah, she did. She did.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great old photos that we loved looking back on.
Anyway, I pass it on to Bob. He's the next oldest.
Okay.
Bob?
Oh, I thought, wasn't Joy here? She's...
No, Joy's not here.
Candy's here,
Yeah.
though.
Candy's here.
Candy's here.
You can pass it on to Candy.
Yeah, so I'm the same path. It's Phyllis to Parker to me. I also have a small piece of furniture from the house. It's an old side table, sort of very Italian style. Wonderful piece. But
Not surprising when you think of how big the house was.
Right.
And now I'm wondering if Jane Eklund is on at all. I had such fun talking to her.
But I'm Jane Eklund's niece, if she is not on.
Okay.
And I am Jane Eklund is my aunt. Tom and Lois Eklund are my grandparents. And I lived in the house with my parents, Ann and Rod, for a number of years when they first purchased it. I actually took my first steps in what is the billiards room. and have memories of every holiday in the home, and it was a wonderful place.
Yeah.
Well, I so enjoyed talking to your aunt.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The
Aw.
stories that she had. Oh, it was
Thank you
such
so
fun.
much for putting this together. It was so fun to walk down memory lane in the history of the home. It was really special.
I just want to say my sister Candy, it's Bob, myself, and Candy is
Oh, yes.
Bob. Candy, do you want to say anything?
Where is Candy? Oh, there she is.
I don't know if you can hear me well, but I just had to emphasize our father was an only child, and he said over and over again that one of the highlights of his growing up was when his cousins came to visit during the summer. So I know we cousins here, and you just can't even calculate what all that meant to him. So
yes,
really great to see everybody.
Well, I love reading his memoirs.
By the way, probably something we ought to clarify too is just so people know is the Ishams and the Marks and thus Wymans, et cetera. I mean, they were actually friends before. Okay. I think there's stories of my mother actually having dated one of the Ishams at one point. And I went to school later. I went to prep school with some of the Ishams. But as I understand it, the families were, it wasn't like a bunch of people just came in and took over a house they didn't know. As I understand it, the Ishams knew the house before and knew the family.
Wonderful.
So.
And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted everybody to see there is, I don't know, Caitlin, you'll have to speak up and say, what generation is Caitlin who is related? So can you hear me, Kate?
So say hi.
Madeline. This is Madeline.
So
the newest.
Madeline is the 6th generation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, she was in the video. The last shot.
Okay.
Now, are there any Ishams? Like Pam? I enjoyed talking to Pam. All right.
I just want to say for the West Coast Savilles, this is John Saville III.
Oh, good.
With my wife Kathleen and my daughter Emily. It just, if you notice, I'm wearing the Dodger cap. My dad, John Saville, had left the Cubs came to the West Coast and adopted the Dodgers. And if you didn't remember, we won the World Series last November.
And your grandmother is Lydia Marie.
Lydia Marie and John Saville, my grandparents.
Right.
Lydia Mark.
And so back to the East Coast.
Right, Meg.
Yeah, so I am Meg Saville Glazer, and my grandmother was also Lydia Saville. She married John Saville, but she was Lydia Mark. And then my sister is up above too. She's Anita Saville. She's here with us too. And this is my husband, Mert. So
where's Anita?
Hi, everybody.
Oh, there's Anita.
Hi.
So great to see all of you. I can't stand it. I wish I were closer and I could come and see the house. I've never been there. But as was mentioned, the cousins had a great time convening in the summers. I remember our dad, Mark Saville, who named Mark for the Marks, which was which was part of the tradition at that time, was to name one of your children Lydia after your maiden name. But he talked a lot about going and spending the summers there, and what a great place it was.
So just a quick note on naming Saville names. My middle name is Griffith, and I never knew where that came from until I was at Peter Mark's apartment in Chicago several years ago and saw a portrait of Anna Griffith and said, okay, so that's where the Griffith came from. Also talking about the furniture, as we were watching the video, I remarked to Murray, I said, see those wicker chairs? I said, they're in our pool house now. And so I always am very happy to be sitting in them because I know they came from the original Mark House.
Well, this was a wonderful experience, and thank you, History Center, for allowing us to do this. And for me, I hadn't spoken to the Wymans, Cherry Wyman, for over 55 years. ago. I don't even remember Bob. So it gave me the opportunity to talk to all these relatives and to reminisce. So that was fun. And Candy, it's fun to see you too. So.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for putting this together. You did a lot of work on this, and thank you to the Garricks for letting us in and allowing us to film and sharing this experience. You know, one of the things about Lake Forest and Lake Bluff that make it so extraordinary is this sense of stewardship of the homes, of the land, of the area. And these are the sorts of conversations that we like to encourage around people's houses. This was a great one. It was a great start for this program, and we're so thankful to all of you for attending and for everybody who put such incredible effort into building this presentation. Thank you again for supporting the History Center. We're glad to be a part of this community.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
The
History Center has a couple other programs coming up that we might want to mention. Do you want me to just
Please,
quickly
yeah,
I was going to say, for people who are local, we have tours of Crabtree Farm coming up. I think is it May 15th?
Yeah.
That is always a great place to go see and walk in the springtime. And later in May, if this is for anyone, both local and non-local, a Zoom program that's going to be an interview with Fred Jackson about the history of Deer Path Golf Course. If you grew up golfing at Deer Path, it should be a really interesting talk as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Fred Jackson tournament at Deer Path. So take a look for both of those on our website.
All right.
All right. Yep. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful program. Thank you, Lori and everybody. Nice to see you all.